Welcome back to Real Clear Radio Hour, brought to you by the Competitive Enterprise Institute. I'm your host, Bill Frezza. We're pleased to welcome Hollywood writer, director, and producer Cyrus Nowrasteh, whose various film credits include The Day Reagan Was Shot, The Path to 9/11, The Stoning of Soraya M, and his latest release, The Young Messiah. We caught up with Cyrus on Radio Row at the CPAC conference and slapped the headphones on him before he could get away. Cyrus, welcome to the show.
Great to be here.
Cyrus, I asked you on to discuss the art and politics of storytelling. As an award-winning writer and director, you're a bit of an enigma as you've been attacked by a very diverse spectrum of ideologues. Critics on the right raised a fuss over your film The Day Reagan Was Shot. Your miniseries Path to 9/11 ended up getting banned by the Clinton machine. And your film The Stoning of Soraya M was banned by Iran's Ayatollah. Before we get into the why of each of these episodes and talk about your recently released The Young Messiah, take us back. How does your Iranian heritage inform your views as an artist?
You know, that's a great question. I don't know if I can answer it, but I'm going to try, because sometimes I feel like there are others who could maybe comment on that better than I could, because sometimes we don't understand our subconscious motives. But, you know, I think the fact that my parents are immigrants, I lived in Iran as a child, and speak Farsi, not perfectly, but well enough.
Mm-hmm. And you lived there during the time of the Shah?
Yes, I lived there during the time of the Shah, when women could go around and work and go to school and be human beings. So the problem is, it's not really a problem, but it's just, it's hard for me to analyze completely. I'll just say this. I think it makes me feel like I'm inside, that I am an American, but I'm also on the outside looking in as someone of foreign-born parents.
Such a common perspective for particularly us New Yorkers who grew up with immigrant parents and grandparents.
I think a lot of my friends, a lot of my Jewish friends, growing up, one of the reasons why we became friends was we were kind of approaching things from that angle, that our parents or grandparents were from another country, but we saw ourselves as Americans on the inside, but we also understood that perspective from the outside.
What turned you into a storyteller? Why a career in film?
You know, I just love stories. I love history. Going to movies when I was a kid, seeing movies up on the big screen that were recreating another time, historical figures. I love that the most. And I always thought, you know, that'd probably be neat to do.
Do you remember a film called Z that came out when we were young?
Yeah, I remember it. I saw it when I was a kid.
Very impactful. It was about the overthrow of the junta in Greece. Did that influence you in any way?
Z influenced me more stylistically. I just thought it had a certain energy and verve in terms of the visuals that Costa-Gavras was doing.
Yep. And had a photojournalistic kind of a look to it.
Yeah, very much so. And I've done journalistic type stuff, and I love it. And I love Z. There's some other movies of Costa-Gavras that I love, State of Siege, great filmmaker. Lawrence of Arabia influenced me as a child.
Oh, wow.
You know, movies like movies I saw when I was a kid. Yeah, that's an epic. And I remember it because we arrived late, about 15, 20 minutes late, and I sat down, and I was immediately enthralled by the imagery I was seeing. And, of course, it's covering the Middle East. It's covering characters who are brown who look like me. It's also got this blonde figure who feels like he's part of the culture but is not. He's on the outside looking in.
Oh, interesting.
And also, you know, look, I love movies. I love Westerns. I love The Wild Bunch. When I was a kid, I remember that. There's certain experiences you remember going to the theater. I remember the spaghetti Westerns.
Absolutely.
Of Sergio Leone.
My favorite.
And watching television as well, Missiles of October with William Devane as Kennedy, as JFK.
Yep.
So
7 Days in May.
I always thought, you know, I was always enthralled by the behind-the-scenes kind of featurettes. And I thought, maybe I ought to try and do that.
So Hollywood is not particularly known for its political diversity. How do you fit in?
Well, first of all, my politics weren't really known to people in Hollywood.
You want to keep it that way, or is it too late?
Unfortunately, yeah, I'm out of the closet. So Path to 9/11 is really what did that. Path to 9/11 caused this big backlash. I mean, when I did The Day Reagan Was Shot, I got hammered by the right. But, look, I've been able to navigate Hollywood just fine, whether they think I'm right-wing, left-wing, or whatever they think I am. Mainly because I know what I'm doing. I know how to tell a story.
Well, you work with Oliver Stone on The Day Reagan Was Shot, and he's kind of known for his left-leaning conspiracy theories. Is that what set the right off?
Yes. Also, Richard Allen wanted to be an advisor on the movie, and as I was talking to him, he was talking more and more as if this was the Richard Allen story, and I said, I'm not going to work with you as an advisor, so he turned it around and got Deaver and the rest of these guys together to attack me.
Fomented.
But Oliver obviously triggered a lot of it, but See, I think Oliver's more interesting than the standard left-leaning interpretation of his work. I don't think you could find a more conservative film than World Trade Center, than Nixon. I don't think you can find a more sympathetic version of Nixon than his movie. I also think he was accused of being a right-winger and a racist because he wrote and got the Academy Award for Midnight Express.
That was him?
Yeah, and also for writing all that anti-communist stuff in the mouth of Al Pacino when he wrote the script for Scarface. So Oliver, Oliver sometimes, I think, plays the left-wing card so he can be accepted, at film festivals and places he goes to across Europe. He got attacked in Spain viciously for World Trade Center, who accused him of making a movie that George W. Bush would have made.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So he's got to be careful, too.
Everybody's got to be careful.
Walk us through the path to 9/11 controversy. I mean, ABC spent $40 million producing that work, and they were persuaded not to broadcast it. When did the trouble start?
Well, they actually did broadcast it once, but then they buried it after that. The attempt initially was, look, Disney ABC came to me.
Well, remind us what it was.
It's a mini-series about, the path to 9/11. It starts with the attack on the World Trade Center in 93. And tells the story all the way up to 9/11.
Largely through the Clinton administration and the first days of Bush.
Largely through the Clinton administration, the first 9 months of Bush. We deal with the opportunities missed, the canaries in the coal mine, people like John O'Neill. It's a docudrama.
So it's not a counterfactual. It's, if they had only done X.
Right. I also cross-cut the path of the terrorists, the plot hatched by bin Laden
as
and
we
Khalid
learned
Sheikh
about
Mohammed. Yeah, and so it's a heck of a show. Unfortunately, people can't see it. It aired once. I have copies in my garage that I send to people.
You can't
get
friends. It on Netflix or on Hulu or anything like that?
No,
they just buried it.
It is the only banned film in America. You cannot get it on DVD. You can't stream it. You can't get it anywhere.
It's got to be bootleg somewhere.
Yeah, out of my garage.
How did that happen?
We did an advanced screening here in Washington. National Press Cup 3 weeks before broadcast, which was actually 10 years ago, September 2006.
Okay.
3 weeks before broadcast, we did it, showed it at the National Press Club. We only could show the first night. The first night deals with the failures of the Clinton administration. So the Clintonistas were there. Richard Benveniste and a bunch of the Clinton buddies were there at the table.
They went nuts.
They went nuts. They launched into attack on me, which I could not believe. I resisted as best I could. I told them, you got to watch night two. You got to watch night two. And then Michael Barone comes up to me afterward, and I didn't even know him. Comes up to me and says, they're going to launch an attack against you. They're going to try to make sure this doesn't air.
Right.
Be prepared. I laughed. I thought he was kidding.
Yeah, it's America. How could that happen?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, of course, they came very close to blocking him from broadcasting the first time. They convinced Disney to cut 3 minutes out of it. And we aired. The controversy actually helped us. We got 28 million viewers, and we were number one in the ratings on the second night. Then it was never seen again.
Yeah.
It was buried. Clinton had a lot of influence on the Disney board. There's a book, Carol Felsenthal, entitled Clinton in Exile, where she details a lot of what happened behind the scenes on the path to 9/11 and the blocking of the path to 9/11. There's actually a documentary by John Ziegler called The Blocking of Path to 9/11, which is about the controversy. You can get that.
That you can get, but you can't see the movie itself.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So you were an early victim of what now is so common in social media, which is a demonization campaign. I wonder if you can comment a little bit about the role of demonization in the media and how it's used to silence people.
Well, I was new to all of this, and I suddenly had a target on my back, and they had sort of united. They're very good, I think, especially the left. I think they're better at it than the right.
Yeah.
In uniting all their minions, all their little keyboard cowards and bloggers.
I've not heard that word before.
And all those people out there who launch these attacks. I mean, they were able to shut down the telephone system into Disney. That's how well coordinated they were.
Yeah.
So, unfortunately, we gave them a 3 weeks head start. As far as I, myself, personally am concerned, I mean, it was shocking the stuff I was seeing, stuff that was just made up. Max Blumenthal made up an entire story that was more fiction in it than my docudrama, okay?
But that's an old political technique. You know the stories of Lyndon Johnson's early elections in Texas. I mean,
but why does it get picked up by people like the New York Times and Maureen Dowd, who buy what he writes?
Well, they're the megaphone.
Yeah, and then she launched it. You know what? When you make a movie about Path to 9/11, when you make a movie about the day Reagan was shot, the Stoning of Soraya M, the stuff that I do, even if you make a movie like The Young Messiah, you're going to get attacked. So that comes with what I do. But I was shocked at how much fiction is involved
Gets served up.
and behind those and served up in the name of journalism.
Cyrus, your 2008 film, The Stoning of Soraya M, takes a hard look at the dark side of Islamic culture. It was banned in Iran, but you managed to smuggle in enough CDs to plant the seeds for pretty wide viewership. What does this movie tell us, given fears that have been raised over an Islamic immigration invasion of Europe?
Well, here's the thing. I'm going to separate those issues. Okay? It's like I didn't make an anti-immigration movie.
Of course not. That's why I asked you the question.
I'm the son of immigrants.
Yes.
I made a movie about Sharia law and how it's practiced in Iran, based on an actual case. I wanted to show what, I mean, people thought that, oh, gee, they've got this Sharia law and they're stoning people and they still have these laws from 2,000 years ago. I said, no, those were banned under the Shah. It was reinstated, a modern reinstatement within our lifetime of stoning as a punishment.
Isn't that what people fear in Europe? That these subcultures are going to start bringing back Sharia law?
Well, you know what? That may be. I think that we have to have, obviously, levels of security, and we hope we have them inside our country and inside Europe. We hope they're keeping an eye on the ball and not looking at it as a law enforcement problem. But I'm not going to whitewash all of those immigrants as terrorists coming to install Sharia law. And I don't think that's what you're saying either. I just think, we have to still have borders and we still have to have security, and I'm all for that. But I'm also a believer in immigration.
How do you smooth the path to assimilation? America has always been so good at it. Europe, so. How do we make it easier for these immigrants to adopt our culture rather than bring theirs?
I think economic opportunity is what it's about.
Bingo.
My oldest son, Cyrus Nowrasteh, runs immigration policy for the Cato Institute. I don't know if you knew that. But Alex, I'm very proud of him. And he does a lot of research and gives a lot of talks and gets, attacked by a lot of people.
Sure.
But he's got a lot better answers than I do, but I've learned a lot to have my eyebrows raised from him. I'll never forget him telling me when I was arguing with him about immigration, this is years ago, before he even worked at Cato. And he said, Dad, I live in California. He says, the guys have been mowing your lawn for as long as I've been a kid. Have you ever checked their papers? And he was right. And he goes, do you like the work they do? I said, yeah,
sure.
I do.
Yeah.
And I think it's a complex issue, the economics of immigration. He knows a lot more about it than I do. But I've been convinced that it's a plus, especially for California.
If you were to do a movie on that, what stories would you tell?
Boy, that's a good, he's asked me the same question.
That's your strength. Why not do it?
I don't know what stories I'd tell. I'm going to find it. And when I find it, I'll know I have it. I like to do true stories. So it's really a matter of research and just figuring it out. I don't want to spin something that just pushes a point of view. I find when you do true stories in reality that they're generally more layered and more interesting than when you just spin it out in your, in your brain.
Therein lies a challenge, so I do want to talk to you about your latest flick, Young Messiah. The only Bible story about Jesus' youth I remember from Sunday school was how he impressed the elders at the temple with his religious knowledge. Assuming the historicity of Jesus, what sources beyond the Bible did you draw on for your story?
Well, it's interesting. This is based on a novel by Anne Rice. In the epilogue to her original paperback release, she went into a lot of details of her sources. However, when we got involved, we decided to look at those sources. And some of them we found with theologians and biblical scholars that we were talking to might be objectionable. And you know what? When you're making a movie, it's for a much broader audience, and it can cause a much bigger ruckus than if you publish a novel.
Yep.
You got to be careful. So I asked the theologians to look at early drafts of our script. We had come up with some ideas on how to change some things so that we could just broaden the scope and not offend people with this movie.
Are you worried about being attacked by evangelicals?
No, I'm not. You know why? Because I've screened the movie so many times now to them. We're getting incredible endorsements.
Okay.
We're going to endorse a Focus on the Family, Campus Crusade. The Southern Baptists have come out in support of the movie. I was told that would never happen.
Interesting.
You know why? Because they come in skeptical, and they come in with their theological checklist.
Because he's this guy that's not one of us, and he's trying to tell a story about young Jesus.
Exactly.
Give me a break here.
Right.
And he's from Hollywood.
I'm a Christian, but yes, I can see how I'd be perceived as not one of us. I'm a Christian by choice. We were all baptized before they could make a choice. But here's the deal. They come in with their skepticism and their theological checklist. They watch the movie, and they suddenly become embraced, and they embrace these characters on screen. They have an emotional connection to the story, which is what movies are all about.
Right.
And the checklist gets tossed out the window. The skepticism is gone.
But isn't that the power of narrative?
That is the power of narrative, and that's why the Clintons were upset about the path to 9/11. The same reason. When you watch it in a movie, and if it's well done, okay, and I think I'm good at what I do, been doing it a long time, it's like you are suddenly in the world of this movie and these characters and this, by the way, Jewish family with Jewish traditions.
I wanted to ask you about that because, the expansion of Jesus' mission beyond his own Jewish community didn't start till well after his death when Saul of Tarsus had his road to Damascus conversion and began his mission to the Gentiles. I was going to say, does your film reflect the fact that in his time, the temple cult Jews were going through a really turbulent period looking for a worldly political leader? They weren't looking for an otherworldly Messiah. They were up against the Romans. Is that reflected in the film?
I think they were looking for whatever they could find, whatever they could grab, because it was a chaotic, turbulent time. It's not in the novel, but we create young King Herod as a character to show that. We also focus a bit on the Roman presence.
And they were freaked out by the temple Jews. Every place else they occupied, which was polytheistic, they shared their gods. Oh, you got a wine god? We got a wine god. No problem. The temple Jews said, no, we're having none of this. They ended up burning it down.
Yes, that was 70 A.D.
Yeah.
Now, I have a scene in the movie. I won't tell you where it is. Sean Bean plays a Roman centurion. I don't know if you know Sean. Great actor, Game of Thrones, Lord of the Rings. He plays a Roman centurion. The Romans actually are inside the temple. And the crowd starts to go crazy.
Yeah, they're not happy about that.
Right, they're not happy about that. But this is a Jewish child in a Jewish family with Jewish traditions. And, yes, it's a turbulent time, and we show that. The family at the beginning of the movie is in Alexandria, where they fled to Egypt after the slaughter of the innocents when he was a baby. And now, after 7 years, they're going back to the Holy Land. And so they're going back to this chaos, and that journey affects them because they get in the midst of it.
Interesting.
And in that journey, this child, this very special child who's fully divine and fully human, the human side of him is trying to put the pieces together. He's 7 years old, and he's wondering,
it's like a Superman story.
Kind of. Although I'm not going to go with that. So, what happens is he starts to ask questions. He starts to ask questions. He wants to know who he is. Why is this going on?
Now, Joseph is a pretty marginalized character in most Bible stories. I understand you try to bring him a little bit more into the foreground.
He had to have been in the foreground.
You
think? Yeah. An angel came to him, too. So, I have a strong Joseph. I love my Joseph. I think he's the best Joseph ever in a biblical movie. And he's strong and he's sensitive and he's a great father. And I've had fathers who've seen advanced screenings of the movie come to me and say, hey, this movie taught me how to be a parent, because both parents are faced with this incredible burden.
Yeah, think about it.
It's not only they want to protect their kid, but, oh, by the way, this is the Son of God. So you better handle carefully.
Cyrus, we live in a time of religious turmoil. There's so much going on in the world right now, a clash of civilizations, if you will. Are there lessons in your movie that could maybe give us all a path ahead?
It's interesting. Some people who've seen the movie, and what amazes me is, okay, I'm a conscious artist. I know what I'm trying to do. I know the story I'm trying to tell. And I wrote the script with my wife, who's a writer on her own. We write scripts together now. We wrote Soraya together. And both of us have said this. That subconsciously or unconsciously, what happens is people point out things in the movie that we didn't even realize.
Interesting.
Okay? Some of them are theological things, but this movie's about a kind of a family migration. They have been forced to flee their country to a foreign country, Egypt. They live in a Jewish ghetto, where they're somewhat oppressed by the powers that be in Egypt. Now they're traveling on the road with many others because Herod the Great has died and word has spread. So a lot of Jews are returning, hopeful.
Yeah, give us another shot here.
Give us another shot. And unfortunately, they realize the new guy's possibly a bigger lunatic than the previous one. So it's really about sort of traversing, a difficult times, migration, trying to find security, trying to find a place where you can practice your faith honestly, protect your children, find your place in the world. That's what it's about.
So, Cyrus, clearly you're keenly aware of the power of narrative. It's what you do. But there's also power in false narrative. And there's so much of that in the media today. It's promulgated by political advocates on both sides. We're awash in it. How do we deal with that as rational creatures? How do we deal with these narratives, separate the true from false, and push back against the ones that are turning us into wicked people?
I don't know if I have an answer to that. All I can say is I do think we live in a time where at least we have a lot of choice in terms of who we listen to and who's broadcasting to us. And I can flip from Fox to MSNBC.
But doesn't that ghettoize us into areas where we hear what we want to hear and see what we want to see?
Well, no, it does. But that's why I said I'll flip. It's like, where can I find the truth here? And hopefully you can navigate it online.
Take it
whatever.
all in.
But that's different from what I do. Movies have just as much power to deceive as any other form. But I'm naive enough to believe that if it's well done, you can't really fake it for too long. You can't fool all the people all the time. You can fool some of the people.
Sooner or later, the truth will out.
I think so. And, I've seen movies that powerfully affected me. And I know they were trying to beat me over the head with a point of view.
Yep.
Then I'll watch them years later, and I'll say, wow, that's pretty shallow stuff.
Right. How did that get so far before I figured them out?
How did that work? Maybe I was young and impressionable when I saw it. Maybe I was thinking alike. And it's like I said, they were preaching to the choir when I saw it. I don't know. But sometimes I like to re-look at things and sort of re-examine a bit.
Well, on that note, despite my own religious disbelief, I'm looking forward to seeing Young Messiah. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Thanks, Bill. It's a pleasure.
That was Iranian-American filmmaker Cyrus Nowrasteh here on Real Clear Radio Hour, brought to you by the Competitive Enterprise Institute. I'm your host, Bill Frezza. You can check out Real Clear Radio Hour on Facebook or follow us on Twitter at Real Clear Frezza. And while you're at it, take a look at RealClearMarkets.com, my go-to place for diverse views on political economics. Today's program was partially underwritten by the generous support of Old Boston Restorations, Victorian Property Management Company in Boston's South End. That wraps up our show for this week. Please join us next week when member of the European Parliament Anders Vistisen and food and wine writer Michael Booth share contrasting views on socialism Danish style. See you then.